Hey, welcome to the One Piece at a Time Distilling Institute with your host, the alchemist of Indiana's Black Forest, Alan Bishop. Hey, this channel is all about home distilling and legal distilling. If you've got questions, reach out to us in the comments below, social media, or via bishopshomegrown@gmail.com. And don't forget to check out thealchemistcabinet.com. Hey guys, still yet another talking head video as I wait for this rainstorm to pass over Pekin. Give me a little break here shortly. Should have about an hour and 20-minute break I can get my bike riding in on. I do have an exercise bike in the basement, but and I don't hate it. I actually rather enjoy it. I'm enough of a dork at this point. I'll look up bicycling videos in different countries and stuff, and I'll watch that while I'm riding. The only problem is it doesn't have enough resistance to satisfy me. So I do a lot of resistance riding. So my bikes are all geared as road bikes or as touring bikes, or mountain bikes or hybrids, whatever you want to say. My exercise consists of, let's find a gear, let's stick with that through the conditions, all the conditions, let's master that on our route or combination of routes, and then once that's done and we're good at that, let's go to the next gear, and then let's go to the next gears, right? I'm building up resistance training to be able to ride farther and longer through gears in the future, basically, because I want to be able to get out here in the countryside and really enjoy myself, or if I go places and visit, I want to be able to really get out and not have to worry too much about what I'm going to find in the train. And that's going to require me to have a base physicality for bicycling that's already built up, and that resistance is going to give me that base physicality. Alongside with, I started cutting some trails into my 40-acre woodlot back here, which is pretty rough terrain, to do some mountain biking on, because that's also good training, and it hits those muscles that the road biking doesn't normally get. So I've been trying to do that twice a week or whatever, just to add to it. But that's all aside from this. You guys know this channel is where you come when you have questions about the art of distillation, be it professional or amateur. I'm happy to help you out in any way, shape, form as I can. Send me your questions, bishopshomegrown@gmail.com, YouTube comments below, or anywhere on social media. Be on the lookout for the 2026 or 2027. I think I said 2026 in the last video too, which kind of sucks. I apologize. No, it's 2026. What is going on with me? See, I get confused when I start doing these videos. Be on the lookout for the 2026 Practical Distillers and Alchemist Almanac. That's pretty good. A guy that writes almanacs can't remember what year he wrote it for. It's because I'm always a year ahead or a year behind on something. That'll be available coming soon. It's at the printer now. When it gets to me, it'll go up for purchase on the alchemistcabinet.com. The Advice for Sovereign Distillers limited edition book I'm writing right now, having a lot of fun doing that. That's going to be very magic oriented, very spiritual oriented. There'll be some practical stuff in there too, but it's going to be a really unique thing that I'm going to try to do for the people the lucky people who want that. They're the ones that I hope are the ones that are going to get it, as opposed to just whoever doesn't care about the spirituality of distillation or the alchemy of it, therefore. But what else going on? Oh, One Piece at a Time, or If You Have Ghosts, You Have Everything podcast. New season right now, also in the middle of spooky season for Halloween and October and all that stuff. Getting ready to put up a new episode here this evening while I get done bike riding, and then there may or may not be a new distillation podcast coming with a co-host. So that could be a lot of fun and something really, really interesting. So let's get into questions here, though. So this is from Randy. He says, "Hey Alan, I sent a question a few weeks back, rewritten, hoping to get another shot. It's understandable you skipped, since my original email was rather long, wordy, and not very organized. So here's hoping it'll survive the cut this time. And as always, thanks for your consideration." I typically try not to skip anybody's emails, but what happens sometimes is I'll be going through my pile of emails, and I'll have them printed out like this, have them here in front of me, and I'll see one that's really long, and I'll already be like 3 questions in. I'll be like, well, that'll be its own video. Well, then if I've recorded 3 or 4 videos before that, then I'm like, man, I don't know if I got the energy for this tonight, right? And so I'll set it aside and plan to come back to it. Sometimes it happens. Sometimes it gets lost in the mix. You know how life goes. So I do apologize for that. But I've been distilling whiskey for over a year and a half now, mostly with your inspiration. Thank you. But I felt making brandies was out of my realm, since I don't have any land to grow fruit or have a source for reasonably priced fruit. However, I have an idea of how I might be able to dip my toes into the art of brandy distillation, but I need your guidance and expertise. My idea is to start with a cider made from inexpensive store-bought apple juice to provide the bulk of the alcohol. That's a great idea. Then making a stripping run using this inexpensive cider and macerate the resulting low wines with some dehydrated and possibly some fresh apples, and or anything else you might recommend, raisins or other fruit, to add some flavor. Again, another great idea. For this flavor, I can dehydrate a wide variety of apples I can purchase at the store or farmer's market. I have the ability to smoke the fruit while dehydrating. I also need some advice on apple varieties you feel would work best in my workflow. After macerating the fruit in the low wines for a time that you would recommend, my plan is to take the macerated low wines and do a spirit run on my pot still, which has a large copper onion with a 4-inch tri-clamp at the bottom and top, which is then reduced down to a 2-inch copper column that's about 2 inches in height before going into a very efficient all-copper shotgun condenser. So there's more email here, but I'm going to go ahead and answer some of these questions. This is exactly a great idea for how to, with limited resources, make a fantastic apple brandy. Yes, store-bought apples. I've said this before, Yellow Delicious tends to be the best culinary apple. Stay away from the super sweet apples, the Honey Crisp and things of that nature. They're not, and Red Delicious, not worth messing with, right? Golden Delicious, maybe some Granny Smith from time to time, although it's actually an immature apple. That's not a fully ripe apple, believe it or not. Granny Smith is yellow when it's actually ripe. It's an incredibly long season apple, mostly grown in Australia. Start with that, and then wherever you can source apples from, good local apples. So one thing, look locally. I bet in your neighborhood, I don't know where you live, but somewhere close to you, there's probably a neighborhood, a subdivision with crab apples. Crab apples are phenomenal for flavor. As far as recommendations, so not so much name varieties other than wine sap, which is a pretty obvious one out there, but be on the lookout and talking to farmers and seeing if you can find specific cider apples, right? Or specifically acidic apples and or somewhat bitter apples. The more diversity you have, the more flavor you're going to bring when it comes to either making cider or drying those down for distillation. Also, let me say this. I probably would go ahead and make the cider and go ahead and double pot distill. This is how I prefer to do this most of the time. Strip run, spirit run, then macerate the apples, the dried apples. I macerate the dried apples typically. If I'm not able to run my solids, I'm going to macerate for 2 weeks. If I can run the solids in the still, macerate for 24 to 48 hours, something like that, you're good to go, right? If you can't run the apples, run the solids in the still, I would find a way to press all the alcohol and juice out of those apples that you possibly can before you run, or you're going to be robbed of a lot of alcohol. Let's go on with the email. If you feel this might be a good plan so far, would you recommend straining the macerated apples out before the final spirit run? Again, that's going to depend on whether or not you can run them in your still. If you can run them in your still, always run them in your still. If not, would you recommend putting the macerated fruit in a bag to reduce the chance of scorching? I would put it in a bag that is alcohol safe and make sure that you have a still that you can line. I've talked about this with botanicals and stuff in the past. Either find a way to hang that bag in the still or tie that bag off. If you got a still that you can open up the top of and put something in there as a false bottom, jars or something of that nature, where that whole bottom's covered, that works fine too. Just don't push the distillation to where whatever's on the bottom is a false bottom starts hopping around and that part of the bag touches the bottom. I will mention that my still has a perforated false bottom. Okay, well that's great. And is heated with an ultra low watt density electric element underneath the bottom, and the liquid is not in direct contact with the element. Okay, so as long as the liquid's not in direct contact with the element, that's good. So, I'm not an element guy when it comes to, I don't have a lot of experience with elements directly in pot. So, but as long as you don't have to worry about that pectin or starches or anything burning that element, you're good to go here. So I get a very even heat across the bottom of my still. Also, the power percentage can be adjusted using the controller. Perfect. For even more flavor, I am also considering add some kind of a gin basket to suspend above the macerated low wines and below the copper onion, or even inside the copper onion since it's rather large and filling with apples. If so, would you recommend using fresh or dehydrated fruit? In the still, wherever possible, and out of the still, wherever possible, dehydrated fruit. It's much more intense, it's much more aromatic. And you're not, so the problem with running undehydrated apples, especially in a gin basket or something like that, is you're going to pull the water, the juice over from those apples, and you're going to get cloudy product. So always dehydrated if possible. What you're talking about doing here is one of my methods I've used for years and years and years. And it's also something that we did at Mount Vernon. Me, Eric, and Aiden. Eric Wolf of Still and Wolf Distillery, our buddy Aiden Pemberton, who's a cider distiller, of course Steve Bayshore, Paul Menta, Brian Cushing, all those guys. When we did apple brandy at Mount Vernon, we basically did exactly this, but we actually did it on the stripping run. No, I take that back. We did some on, I think, on the doubling run too. We took cheesecloth, made bags, 3 or 4 layers, tied it off and hung it up directly underneath the head of the still. So again, you're right on the right path here. Originally I was wanting to avoid adding a thumper to my system, but I recently heard you say doing so with brandy can add a lot of fresh flavor that you probably can't get any other way by adding washing fruit, dehydrated or fresh. Again, so the thumper is interesting. You can add more fresh fruit to it because the water's typically going to stay behind the thumper. You're not going to get that clouding effect. And I would consider adding at your suggestion. If so, is there a way to possibly rig up some kind of safety relief valve to avoid possible or careless vacuum as a precaution? Also, what size thumper should I consider? Max capacity of my still is 29 gallons, but would most likely be doing a run with around 15 gallons of low wines at possibly 20 to 30 ABV. So you always want your thumper sized about a third the size of your still, basically, is what you're looking at. So you're looking at about a 10-gallon thumper. You can put a two-way pressure relief valve, like a water heater valve, on there. You need 15 pounds, basically, is what you're after. That way you don't have to worry about vacuum, etc. I would add a thumper in general, not necessarily for apple brandy, although it's going to be useful for apple brandy. And what I will tell you is a thumper won't make better apple brandy than a gin basket and the other methods we talked about. It just makes a different style. It's another tool in the toolbox, something else to play with, and always worthwhile to have all the tools that you possibly can in your toolbox and at your disposal. You might find that you like both versions of brandy, or 3 different versions of brandy, or maybe you like blending those different types together for a finished product. So very, very worthwhile in my opinion. And again, in the thumper, you can do fresh apples and pull plenty of flavor across. We do a product called the Wycliffe Bell that has some smoked apples in it, and that is fresh apples, peat smoked fresh apples. So finally, what yeast would you suggest to ferment the inexpensive apple juice, and possibly any possible additions you might recommend to the initial ferment? Any other suggestions or recommendations you have that might improve on my ideas is greatly appreciated. My hope is to age the resulting brandy for a period of time in bad motivator barrels, and possibly some with cleaner cuts to enjoy unaged. Thanks again for all you do for the home and commercial small batch distillers, Randy. You're very welcome. Yeast wise, so with apple brandy I like wild yeast, but there's 2 commercial yeasts that I really love. They're hard for a home distiller to get: OK Yeast and Vin 13. If I couldn't get those, honestly, I'd probably go with EC 1118. EC 1118 is the most widely used yeast in the world. It's actually called Credol de Mousse is the original name of it, and that is the most widely used brandy yeast in the world for a reason. It's a killer strain. It goes to high alcohol. It has great aromatics and fairly low SO2 production. So EC 1118 would be my go-to if I didn't have access to OK or Vin 13, basically. If you're just going for straight up apple brandy, I wouldn't add anything else to it. I'd just stick to the apples. The more types of apples, the better. Again, you will get some pectin fallout with what I'm about to tell you, but if you do some clear spirit or even some brown spirit, let's say you're coming out of that bad motivator after a couple years and you're not quite happy with the apple aromatics, you're not quite happy with the flavor of the apple, and same thing with white spirit. The other thing that we do is we dehydrate apples. I got this from Wayne at Ozark Stillworks. Dehydrate apples and macerate them directly into the brandy itself. When you want to take that off, it's going to give it some color. It's going to make it a little brown, a little tan color. Press those apples out and get that alcohol back out of them. There will be a little pectin fallout in your jars, bottles, whatever you're packing in, but it will improve the quality of that brandy pretty substantially, in my opinion. So great set of questions. Great set of questions. All right, one more. We'll wrap her up. I got to get ready because this rain's going to quit here in a minute. I'm going to get on that bike, damn it. All right, so from Ryan, hello, I found something when looking up absinthe stuff. It was a red rose absinthe using hibiscus to color it. I thought I would see general thoughts on it before I play with it myself. I reached out to Jesse from Still It, and he said that you were a man to ask this question. Your thoughts, variations on recipes, etc. I have so far done very close recipes to the 1700s and 1900s recipes. Jesse has listed in his videos in small volumes. Thanks, Ryan. Great question again. So yes, there are rogue absinthes. So I believe the most popular one was originally made in Spain at one point in time using hibiscus. And then of course Corsair Distilleries, they made a rogue absinthe at one point in time too. My suggestion on a rogue absinthe, I'm not big on hibiscus in general in distillation, especially maceration. And I'll tell you why. It's a weird fat kid tasting note here. To me, hibiscus and alcohol taste a little bit like honey mustard. I know that sounds weird, but it has this bright, tangy, almost vinegar sort of characteristic to it. and I'm not a fan of it. I don't like it. It has a nice color, but it falls out of suspension pretty quickly, especially if your pH isn't set just right. I would start looking at other edible red flowers. Is where I would start looking and see if you can find a color there. Or you could get a hold of some Peruvian maize morado cassuli corn. It's a dark purple corn that they use to make chicha morado with. If you take those kernels, because the anthocyanin in those kernels is actually water soluble, if you take those and drop them in for just a little bit, and you may want to play around with temperature. You can heat it up, you can keep it at room temperature, etc. And then you just need to watch. Just treat it like a tea, right? When you get the color you want, yank those kernels out. You get a nice red or purple or pink color depending on how long you leave it in there. And a little starchiness, which actually adds to the mouthfeel of the absinthe. And it makes a whole lot better quality product, in my opinion, than the hibiscus coloration does. So, alright guys, hope you enjoyed. Love y'all. Later.